Welcome to Reaper's Creepers. Step into the shadows, where tales of the unknown unfold. Relax, listen, and drift into the dark. Welcome. Today's story was written by Boris Bacic. You can find a link to his other stories in the description and pinned comment below. Let's begin. I've lived in a relatively big city all my life, so when my company asked me to relocate to a small town in the middle of nowhere, I wasn't too happy about it. I argued that I could just work remotely with the team there, but my superior was adamant about having face-to-face meetings and building better team cohesion and collaboration. They argued that I could stay in my current residing place, but would need to switch teams and my entire role. So eventually, I picked the lesser evil, to move out into the aforementioned small town. Since I had to bite the bullet, I figured I'd try to make the best of the given situation. Maybe moving to a small town would be a good change of pace. The first thing I noticed when moving was that the rent was a lot cheaper, so I could afford a big house all to myself, which lifted my spirits a little. Another thing that was a big plus for me was the fact that traffic there was pretty much non-existent. My new house was in the peaceful part of the town. The entire town was peaceful, but my area more so. And since my previous apartment was on an avenue with lots of noise, this tranquility was refreshing. As soon as I arrived and unpacked, my doorbell rang. When I opened the door, a man with a huge grin on his face stood in front of me. With his glasses, slick hair, and tidy clothing, he looked like a typical suburban dad. "Hi there. My name's Jim," he said perkily, the smile never leaving his face. "I live across the street. I'm guessing you're Chris, right?" Yeah." I was taken aback. "How do you know that?" He chuckled and said, "Oh, sorry about that. This is a small town, as you already know, and news travel fast. I mean, when I got my letter from the court, my neighbors knew it before I did." I gave him a weak chuckle and shook his hand. "Nice to meet you, Jim," I said. "So listen, my wife makes great cupcakes, so she'll probably bring you some later as a welcome gift." "Oh, that's really not... Afternoon, Clara." Jim waved to a young woman walking her dog down the street. "Taking Rex for an early walk today, huh?" "Yeah, he was really impatient today." Clara smiled widely and then looked at me and said, "Oh, hi there. You must be our new neighbor." I waved back and introduced myself. "I'll be sure to stop by later so we can say proper greetings," she said before having the leash in her hand tugged by the dog. She let the dog take the lead and shouted back, "Would love to stay longer, but Rex is in a hurry. Bye for now." She waved and went down the street. Jim waved back and then turned back to me and said, "That's Clara. She lives down the street in that pink house over there. She runs a book club and has the ladies of the town join once a month for some wine and book discussion. But my wife, Sarah, says they mostly focus on the wine and gossiping." He chuckled, and I smiled back out of courtesy. "So, listen," I said. "I gotta go unpack the rest of my things, so, oh yeah, I totally understand. Hey, if you need any help, don't hesitate to call me. I'll be home all day long." "Thanks, Jim. Have a good one," I said, seeing Jim's friendly and smiling face before I awkwardly closed the door. He seemed like a nice guy, but I was tired and irritated from the long trip and just wanted to take a break. After taking a short nap, I decided I would go explore the town. I knew there wasn't much to be seen, but I wanted to spend my time somehow since I didn't have any work for the day. As soon as I got outside and locked my front door behind me, I heard a voice from the pavement. "Hi, neighbor." I turned around and saw an elderly lady standing in front with a wide smile. She held a plastic food container in her hands. "Hello, ma'am." I smiled back. My name's Chris. Oh, I already know, dear, she said and approached me. Here, I made you some homemade chocolate chip cookies. She handed the plastic container to me, still smiling widely. Wow, thank you, ma'am. That's really kind of you, I said. You can call me Marcy, the lady said. Maybe living here wouldn't be so bad, I thought to myself. Marcy stared at me with her big smile in anticipation, so I took it as a cue that I should check her cookies out. I removed the lid and was a little disappointed to find that the cookies were mint flavored, but I tried one in front of her, nonetheless, and told her how great they tasted. Oh, you should try my lasagna. That will blow you away, dear. She gently put her hand on my wrist and chuckled. Well, I have to get going. My grumpy husband will be angry if he doesn't get lunch in time. Have a good day, dear. Thank you again, Marcy. Oh, and please be sure to return the plastic container when you are done. I've donated so many of those to other people and rarely ever got any of them back. I'll be sure to bring it back to you as soon as I can. I smiled and went back inside to leave the cookies. I got out again, drove down the empty street. Immediately to my left in the distance on a hill, I noticed a big tower of some sorts. It looked like a radio tower, since it had an antenna on the top, so I didn't give it too much thought. I went to my company's office, which was only a few minutes' drive away from my house. The office looked exactly like back in my city, so that made me feel homey. The co-workers welcomed me and we talked briefly before I headed out. It was around 8 p.m. when I returned home and night had already fallen. I wanted to make some dinner, so I decided to walk down to a nearby store and buy something simple like frozen pizza or whatever. I waltzed down the street, spinning my car keys around my finger. On my way there, I ran into Jim and his wife. Hey, Chris, how was your first day here? Jim grinned again. This is my wife, Sarah, by the way. I shook her hand, and we talked a little bit. So, I was just telling Sarah about you, he said. We haven't seen a new face in, well, it must have been years. Just then, a young man in sportswear who was jogging ran past us, saying hi to us in passing. It's true. Sarah smiles as well. But whoever comes here usually never leaves. They just love the peacefulness of the town. I mean, who would want to live in a big city with so much pollution and traffic jams anyway, right? I saw Clara come out the front door of her house behind Jim and Sarah, taking out the trash. She waved, and I waved back. Now, honey, it has its pluses as well, Jim interjected. Just then, I saw a red light blinking in the distance. It didn't take me long to realize it was coming from the radio tower. I stared at the red light and asked, Hey Jim, what's with that tower over there? Is that a radio station? I pointed at the tower, squinting my eyes. I got no response from Jim, so I repeated my question. Jim, that tower, what exactly? I stopped my question halfway through when I looked at Jim. He and Sarah were no longer smiling and were instead staring over my shoulder wide-eyed with a blank facial expression. Jim? I asked and looked behind to see what they were staring at. What I saw only put my nerves on edge even more. The jogger from before stood motionless in the middle of the street, facing away from me, just like Jim and Sarah. I saw with my peripheral vision that an old man who was sitting on his porch was staring in the same direction as the other three residents. I turned back to Jim and Sarah and saw Clara behind them, still standing in front of her house, still holding the trash bag. She was blankly staring in the same direction over my shoulder. I felt my heart racing 1,000,000 miles an hour, but I was frozen in place, afraid to make any sudden moves. Very slowly, I took a step back. And then, in all that mess, My trembling hands managed to drop my car keys on the ground with a loud clatter. The sound echoed in a painfully loud manner, and instantly, all residents turned their gazes towards me. I froze in place again, not sure what would happen next. I wanted to run, but was rooted. Jim and Sarah were not blinking, and the longer I stared at them, the more I realized they were entirely motionless, like statues. Slowly, I took a few more steps back, and they followed me with their unblinking gazes, twisting their necks in my direction but not moving their bodies. I couldn't bear their penetrating stares, so I looked down at my shoes and slowly took step by step. For example, you can find all the big stores anywhere in a big city, unlike here, Jim suddenly said. When I looked back at them, they seemed to be back to normal all of a sudden, smiling again. I looked over their shoulders at Clara and saw that she was placing the trash bag in the can and heading back inside. I frantically turned around and saw that the jogger continued running and the old man on the porch was gone. "Hey, Chris, you okay, buddy?" Jim asked. I turned back to him and stared, trying to figure what the hell just happened. I probably seemed like a lunatic staring at him and sweating bullets. "Maybe you're stressed from moving. You should go home and get some rest," Sarah said with concern. "We gotta go pick up the kids. You be good now, okay?" Jim patted me on the shoulder, and the two of them left. I looked at the radio tower and realized the red light had stopped blinking entirely. I was a little creeped out by the incident that happened on the day of my arrival to the town, but I ended up dismissing it as my tired mind's exaggeration, or my neighbors just staring at something I didn't see. Either way, I wasn't going to let this little incident ruin my life here. A few days had gone by and I had all but forgotten about it, adjusting to my new environment and focusing on work. My co-workers were really friendly and often offered to help me, which was nice of them, albeit at times a little overwhelming. This seemed to be a pervasive behavior among all residents, whether I went to work, a store, a bar, or simply drove back home. On the third day after I moved, my apartment started smelling more and more like mint from Marcy's cookies, and I wasn't planning on eating them, so I just dumped them in the trash bin. I washed her plastic container and went to her house. When I rang the doorbell, I waited for a full minute before turning around. The sound of door opening came from behind me, and Marcy's perky voice greeted me. "Oh, hello, dearie. I'm so sorry for keeping you waiting. I'm an old lady, and it takes me a while to reach the door." "It's all right, ma'am. I just wanted to give you back the cookie container. Thank you for the cookies, by the way." I held out my hand with a smile. She took it and inspected it with a smile, before looking back at me. "You ate them all, I hope?" she asked. Yeah, all gone. Sweets don't last long in my house." I nervously chuckled. She stared at me with her unyielding smile for an awkwardly long moment. "Well, all right then," she finally said. "Would you like to come in for a cup of coffee or tea? I also have some lemon cake which I made today." "I'd love to, but I have some important work to do. Thank you, though." I smiled back. "You be sure to stop by any time, dear. My husband Oliver would love to meet you," Marcy said. I waved to her, and as I turned around, I stopped in my tracks. "Hey, Marcy." I turned back towards her. She already closed her door halfway trough. "Yes?" she asked. "What's that big radio tower over there?" I pointed over yonder. "To be honest, I don't think anyone knows, dear." "Has it been here long?" "Well, I've been living here for over 50 years, and the tower was only built around 6 months ago. At first everyone thought the town was getting a new radio station. But that wasn't the case." Marcy shrugged. "On the day they started working on the tower, multiple vans kept driving in and out of the hills where the tower was being built, but we never got to see which company they were working for, nor did we get to stop and ask them. They were in such a hurry, They were, and they didn't look friendly in the slightest. I wanted to offer them some cookies at first, but then changed my mind. The next day they were gone, and the tower was up, just like that, in a day. I see. I scratched my chin. And have you ever noticed any lights coming from the tower, or something like that? No, I don't think so, dear. In fact, I don't think the tower serves any purpose at all. It may have been abandoned, which is understandable. Setting up the tower all the way back there behind the hills, it's just not practical, and it's not close to anything. I really should get going. Thank you, ma'am. I nodded and finally left. A few more days went by, and I started to get adjusted to my new environment. I'd see Jim, Sarah, Clara, and some other neighbors outside on a daily basis, and would sometimes even run into them downtown. Then, on a Thursday night, Jim knocked on my door. "Hey, Chris, how's your night going? Hope I'm not interrupting anything." He grinned. He always wore similar clothes, a shirt and jeans, and I wondered if he was the type of guy to have a closet full of same outfits that he would just change daily. "No, not at all. Want to come in?" I asked. "No, it's fine. I gotta go back soon. Sarah's making a casserole, and she'll be angry if I'm not there in time. Anyway, listen, the neighbors usually organize game night on Fridays. It's a really good way to unwind and, get to bond a little bit. So we figured we'd have you join us tomorrow. What do you say, champ?" "I don't know, Jim. I have this thing tomorrow that I—" "Oh, come on, it'll be fun." He threw his hands up in the air and smiled even wider. He then leaned in and whispered, "And between us, I think Clara might have taken a liking to you, and she'll be there tomorrow. But you didn't hear it from me." He said that last sentence in a normal tone, and then waited for my response with a smile. "I mean, I guess I could join for a little bit, but I really can't stay for too low—" "That's my guy," Jim said, stepping backwards to his house. "Come over to my place tomorrow, 8 p.m., bud." "Wait, should I bring anything?" I shouted after him. "No need. You're the guest of honor, Chris." And with that last sentence, he went back inside. How the hell did I get into this mess? I guess I'll just bite the bullet and stay there tomorrow for an hour, and then make an excuse that I need to go. Friday night came much faster than I thought, and I dreaded socializing with a bunch of people I didn't know. But just like with moving here, I tried to make the best of it. I donned my casual clothes at 7:50, and as soon as I approached Jim's front door, I heard perky voices coming from the inside, which multiplied my anxiety. I rang the doorbell and heard Jim's voice say something like, "Let me just get that," among the racket. The door opened a few seconds later, and Jim stood there, same clothes and all. "Hey, look who's here. Come on in, come on." He stepped aside, and I went in. I heard unanimous voices greeting me way more enthusiastically than I'd like, and I tried to return that enthusiasm at least slightly. Some of the people who I knew were there, including Clara and Jim's wife and kids. Another married couple, Daniel and Alexis, were there with their own kids, so the children were playing with each other, while the adults sat around the table and talked. As soon as I entered the room, Sarah showed me to my seat and offered me something to drink. I thanked her and joined in on the conversation. "We had just decided that we're going to play Risk tonight. Is that okay with you, Chris?" Jim asked. "Yeah, I'm fine with that, but you'll have to introduce me to the rules." I nodded. Pretty soon we started playing, and despite my initial skepticism, I was having fun. Claire sat next to me, so she gave me tips whenever it was my turn. Jim was eliminated from the game early on, but he was as enthusiastic as ever, cheering on and giving tips to other players. "Attack Peru so you can get the region bonus," Daniel told Alexis about 20 minutes into the game. "Don't. Then Chris can attack you from Africa," Jim shouted. "Just leave 2 figures there and you'll be fine." Sarah shouted. There was a moment of commotion, with everyone shouting advice to Alexis. I glanced to my right at Clara, who seemed to be observing the situation with a smile on her face. I looked down and started counting my remaining tanks before my next turn. Halfway through my counting, the entire room suddenly went dead silent. Just like that. I'm not talking like people stopped shouting and waited in anticipation, children playing in background, etc. I mean so quiet that you could hear a needle drop on the floor. Instinctively, I looked up and my blood froze. Everyone was staring directly at me. I turned my head to my right very slowly, hearing the collar of my shirt brushing against my neck. That's how quiet it was. Clara was staring at me wide-eyed, merely inches away from my face. Even the children were frozen in place and were facing me with their menacing gazes. I held my breath and became painfully aware of how loud any movement I made was. I had to get out of there. I braced myself to run if necessary. Ever so slowly, I pushed my chair back with my legs, which in turn produced a loud scraping sound. To my horror, all the adults in the room mirrored my movement, moving their chairs back simultaneously with a synchronized scraping sound. Despite my better judgment, I moved the chair another inch, and so did the adults. I slowly turned my head towards the exit, and the people followed my gaze to the door, and then back at me. They made every movement in such a synchronized way that it seemed practiced to perfection, and yet I knew something unnatural was happening here. Without further thinking, I jumped out of my chair, and everyone else did the same. I didn't stick around to see what would happen, but instead ran for the door, opening it widely, and running back into my own house, locking my front and back doors, double-checking if they were secure. I went up to the second floor and approached the window in my bedroom while keeping the lights off. With trembling hands, I moved the curtains away slightly and peered at Jim's house. What I saw made my stomach drop to my knees. Everyone in Jim's house was standing at the window, staring directly up at me. I figured there was no way they saw me. It was pitch dark, and I just barely peeked enough to see a something. There was just simply no theoretical way for them to see me. I went down to the first floor and stopped next to the window. I dreaded what I would see if I looked outside, but I just had to know. I slowly peeked out towards Jim's house, and then I saw it. Nothing. There was nothing at the window. No people. Nothing. I saw the porch light come on and the front door open, and my heart started racing again. Daniel, Alexis, and their kids stepped outside. "Thanks for having us, guys," Alexis shouted. "Be here next Friday again, yeah?" Sarah remarked from the door. They left, and the door closed. And that was that. I wish I could say that this is the weirdest thing that happened to me since, but this was just the beginning. The morning after game night with my neighbors, I woke up early, and the first thing I did was peer outside my window to make sure no one was staring, again, from Jim's house. When I made sure it was safe, I took a shower and made breakfast before work. I replayed the night before in my mind, over and over. Everything was going well, we were playing Risk, and then all of a sudden, they just started acting weird. After some thinking, I realized it had happened around the same time as the night when they started staring in the middle of the street. Did that radio tower have something to do with it? At first, I thought I may have been exaggerating, but after last night I was sure I wasn't imagining things. My thoughts were interrupted by my doorbell ringing. Still on edge from last night, I approached the door carefully, grabbed the doorknob, and hesitated. The doorbell rang again, so I just yanked it open. Jim stood in front of me, smile on his face, albeit this time with a noticeable concern on his face. "Morning, Chris. How's it going?" he asked. I stared him down for a moment, and his concern seemed to get deeper, so I quickly responded, Yeah. Good here. How about you, Jim? I smiled vaguely. Fine, fine. Are you feeling better today? That sentence caught me by surprise. Better? Um, I mean, yeah. Why do you ask? It's just that after last night we all got a little worried. Worried? What are you talking about? I chuckled. Chris, you just ran out in the middle of the game. We figured you were just feeling unwell and had to rush to the bathroom or something, but we decided not to bother you. I opened my mouth to disagree, but then changed my mind. I stared at the ground and thought for a second before responding. Yeah, sorry about that. I didn't mean to worry you guys. But yeah, I'm better now. Jim pursed up his lips and nodded, squinting at me suspiciously. After a moment, he raised his eyebrows and smiled again, saying, All right, champ. Well, listen, you're welcome to join next week again. No one's angry or anything. We just got worried is all. Well, I gotta take the kids to school, so you be good now, okay? All right, Jim. Thanks for checking up on me. He patted me on the shoulder and went back to his house. I closed the door and approached my window. I followed Jim with my gaze. His children came out the front door, and Jim told them something about paying attention in school before they entered the car and drove off. Nothing seemed off in Jim's behavior, other than the usual friendliness. I decided I'd be more careful, however, and would try to stay inside during nighttime until I figured out what exactly was going on in this town. The upcoming days went by without a hitch, and I started to feel less anxious about the whole thing. I asked my coworkers and some other people about the radio tower, but no one seemed to know anything about it. The closest I got to any lead was from an old butcher who claimed the tower was probably a shady government project. I asked him what for, but he just shrugged. As crazy as he sounded, his theory actually seemed plausible at that moment. When I asked him out of curiosity how to get to the tower, he said that it's probably not a good idea to try, since there was no known road or trail leading to it. Eventually, I just dropped the topic, since I always ended up with no valuable info. Then, a few nights later, I had just returned home from work at around 8 p.m. and got ready to cook dinner. Out of the blue, I started having a severe headache while cutting meat. It was so bad that my vision got blurry, and I had to put the knife down and lean on the table. A moment later, it passed as if nothing happened, so I did the only thing I could at that moment. I dismissed it and continued cooking. That night, I was woken up around 2 a.m. by a noise outside my window. It took my groggy mind a moment to realize what I was hearing. Gentle knocking. I glanced at my window, but saw nothing, and thank God for that, because if I did, I think I would have crapped my underwear. 3 gentle knocks resounded again, and it became apparent that they were coming from downstairs. I lay in bed, holding my breath, and listening. The knocks resounded once more, this time more frantically. I got up and went downstairs, listening to the knocking along the way. It seemed to get more and more frantic and conveyed a sense of urgency. When I finally reached my living room, I realized the knocking was coming from my window. By now it was no longer gentle and deliberate, but rather panicked and impatient. I approached my window and perked up my ears one last time to make sure I wasn't just imagining things. After a moment of pause, another loud set of knocks startled me. I moved the curtain away and saw a woman's face against the glass staring back at me. I screamed and stepped back. "Please help me," the woman pleaded. Her eyes were wide in fear and tears were streaming down her face, mixing in with the dried mud on her cheeks. Her hair was messy and her clothes dirty, as if she had just come back from a triathlon or something. "Please," she repeated. "If they find me, they'll take me back. I can't go back. Please." I stared at her in disbelief, not sure of what I should do next. She looked genuinely frightened, but what if she was a dangerous junkie? Before I could weigh my options properly, she looked to her right and her eyes widened even more. "Oh no," she said with a trembling voice. "It's them. They're coming." She looked at me and banged on the window a couple more times, louder than before this time, before looking at whoever was out of my line of sight and then beginning to run in the opposite direction. A moment later, I saw a police car drive by my house and stop with screeching tires. 2 police officers got out of the car. "Stop, goddammit," one of the officers shouted. I couldn't see what was going on, so I rushed to the front door and stepped on the porch. "Don't move," the officer shouted again as they restrained the woman and handcuffed her. "Officer, what's going on?" I grabbed their attention. They both jerked their heads towards me, and one of them said, "Sir, everything is under control. You should go back inside." They started taking the woman to the car. She looked at me and said, while resisting the policeman, "Don't let them take me. I can't go back there." "Shut up," the officer shouted and shoved her on the back seat, slamming the door shut. "Sir, go back inside. This is a dangerous criminal," the other officer said. I obeyed, and before going back in, I glanced at the patrol car, and the woman's eyes locked with mine. She seemed not so much terrified anymore, but rather desperate. The patrol car drove off, and it wasn't until then that I realized that they had their sirens off the whole time, even when they were chasing her. I saw the curtains on Jim's bedroom window move slightly, but it was too dark for me to see anyone there. I figured Jim was woken up by the whole racket and was curious, just like me. I went back to bed, wondering what the hell had just happened. I barely got any sleep that night. The following day, I saw Jim when I left home. He was getting ready to go to work himself, and he greeted me on his way to the car. "Hey Jim, did you see what happened here last night?" I asked him. "Last night? What do you mean?" Jim asked, smiling as always. "There was a woman in front here last night, and the cops arrested her. They said she's a dangerous criminal. You really haven't heard or seen anything?" I asked. "No, nothing." "This happened last night, you said?" "Yeah. I thought I saw you at the window when it happened." Jim shook his head. "Maybe it was one of the kids, no idea. But anyway, as long as no one was hurt, all's well. Right?" He smiled again. I didn't believe him, but decided not to press him. "Well, I gotta get to work. I'll see you around, Jim," I said. I got to work and sat by my desk. My routine was to browse the news before I actually started working, and this morning was no different. I opened a news website and started scrolling. Usually it only took me a few minutes to scroll past the town news and start with the world news. Today, however, as I scrolled down speedily, my hand froze when a picture of a woman appeared on my screen. I stared while my heart rate started to increase rapidly at what I was seeing. Above the picture was the title of the news, which said, "Missing woman found dead in park." The news was from today, and yes, you guessed it. Although the woman in the picture was much different than in person, the similarity was undeniable. It was the woman from last night. I requested from my company to be transferred back immediately, not even caring if I had to have a role change. At first my superiors said it was out of the question, but later finally relented. They said the process might take a little longer, since I'd need to change roles, which was apparently more complicated than just switching teams. When I asked how long it would take, they said in the worst case scenario, 2 months. At the time, that didn't sound so bad to me, so I agreed and told them if the process was not complete by then, I'd quit. Although I was extremely eager to unearth this town's secrets, it was definitely not worth putting my life on the line for it. I decided I'd try to stay under the radar as much as possible and just go on with my mundane activities until my transfer was approved. "So, did you hear about the missing girl?" Jennifer Cook? Josh, my coworker, asked me on the same day when I saw the news. I read a little bit about that. Who was she? I asked. I didn't want to reveal anything about what I had seen the night before. Josh shrugged. I didn't know her personally. Apparently she moved into town about 2 months ago and disappeared only 2 weeks later. Such a tragedy right here in our small town. Wait, she was new here? I asked. Yeah. She started working for an accounting company. Come to think of it, I think she was transferred, just like you. This statement put me on edge. Did Jennifer know something and was kidnapped? The cops last night said that she was a dangerous criminal, so her to be found dead the same night just didn't add up. What if the 2 officers I'd seen weren't the police at all? I returned home later that day and watched TV, trying to get my mind off things. It didn't help, so I figured I'd go for a quick walk before it gets too dark and dangerous. Clara was walking her dog Rex, so we stopped to chat a little. You're not going to run out on us again this Friday, will you? She teasingly asked. To tell you the truth, I'll have to see if I got time to even join, I said. You seemed to have fun last time before you got sick, so come on, give it another shot, she winked. We talked for a while, and then she started the topic of Jennifer. Did you hear about the news of the missing girl? She asked. I nodded and decided to test the waters a little bit, so I said, I only read a little bit about it. Who was she and what happened to her? I didn't know her well, but she actually worked in my company, Clara said. What? Wow, this town is even smaller than I thought, I said in surprise. So you knew her? Yeah, we basically worked in the same office and spoke here and there. We weren't close, but I knew her. And then she started acting weird a week before her disappearance. Weird? How? I had to get as much information now as possible, while not sounding too curious. Well, she had these moments where she would be paranoid. It's hard to explain, but she'd accuse people of things, and then 2 days before she disappeared, she started looking over her shoulder. She looked afraid and like she wasn't sleeping at all. I don't know. It's like she knew something would happen. Was she murdered by someone? I don't know. The police gave no details about the case, so for all we know, maybe it was an accident. I thought for a moment in silence, and then asked, Clara, was Jennifer involved in any illegal activities? Clara frowned and shook her head. Well, I sure as hell hope not. I mean, she was weird, but definitely not a criminal. Why do you ask? I looked down at my shoes and contemplated if I should say what I wanted to say next. In the end, curiosity got the better of me, and I disregarded my own safety. I said, listen, last night something weird happened. I leaned in and reduced my tone to a whisper. Claire's look of suspicion turned into one of concern. I continued. I was woken up by a noise in the middle of the night. When I went to check it out, I saw a woman at my window. It was her. It was who? She asked suspiciously. Wait, you mean, hey kiddos? An unpleasantly perky voice behind me startled me, and I felt Jim's hand on my shoulder. We gotta stop meeting like this. He smiled, and Clara smiled back at him and said hi. Sarah was there too, standing next to Jim. Going for a late night walk, Chris? Jim asked. You know you should be getting rest right now. You'll recover a lot faster. I'm fine. I just needed some fresh air is all, I said. Well, be careful not to stay out late, champ. You probably heard about that girl, Jennifer. So sad. His smile turned into an expression of sorrow before he continued. You know, I heard she got involved with some really bad people. Not sure if it was a gang or whatever, but apparently she poked her nose into business that wasn't hers. It's a real darn shame too, because if she just minded her own business, she probably would have still been with us, right? He smiled again and stared at me intently. Jim, that's a horrible thing to say, Sarah said. We don't know what happened to that poor girl. Maybe she had a jealous ex-boyfriend. You're right, honey, I'm sorry. I just always say, live your own life and don't try to be a hero. That's a job for someone like our town's brave policeman. What do you think about the whole thing, Chris? I was caught off guard and suddenly realized all eyes were on me in anticipation of a response. Yeah, I'm not interested in rumors, just living my own life day by day. I finally responded with a probably unconvincing smile. There was an awkward silence as Jim and Sarah stared at me with a creepy smile. Clara broke the silence and said, "Well, Rex is getting impatient, so I should get home. Chris, want to walk my way a bit? It's getting dark, and I'm a little worried after the whole tragedy with Jennifer." "Yeah, sure." "Sarah, Jim, have a good night." I broke my eye contact with Jim, but still felt his eyes on me when I turned around to walk Clara home. Clara waved to Jim and Sarah, and we went our own way. We chatted a little about stuff, but the tension in the air was palpable. When we finally reached her house, she faced me and said, "Thanks for walking me home, Chris. You're really sweet." "It's no big deal." I blushed. "I guess we could maybe go for walks like these more often." "You bet. Well, I'll see you again soon." She approached and hugged me. I hugged back, and when I tried to pull away, she wouldn't let go. She wasn't holding me firmly or anything, just didn't pull away despite me doing so in an obvious manner. And then she whispered in my ear with a trembling voice, "Can't talk. They're watching. Meet me in Cafe Bella tomorrow, around 3 p.m. Make it look like a spontaneous meetup." She then pulled away and, still smiling, waved with her fingers and said, "Night, Chris. Come on, Rex." She went back inside, leaving me with a mind that raced 1,000,000 miles an hour. From Reaper's creepers, the unknown retreats, and the shadows release you for now. Join us again to drift deeper into the dark.